word, regulation, right? All of this has to be regulated. We have a completely stunted regulatory apparatus, if it exists at all, for these things, and we're going to have, I think it's going to have to be a regulation revolution before we can live with artificial intelligence in a way that maintains human dignity, right? Because one of the most terrifying implications of effective computing is, imagine how good China is at facial recognition. We've all read about that. Now imagine that they can use that analyze the faces they can recognize and detect emotions. They can detect intentions, or put, emotions that they can algorithmically link to possible intentions. That is a terrifying invasion of privacy. That is something we could, however, regulate. Theoretically. I mean, I haven't seen it going on much, but you're the political scientist. Maybe you can tell me how far we could get with that.
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment before we get to Jeannette, because I think this is a critical piece for another panel, really, which is the role of government and the public sector. You brought it in, of course, to a certain extent, in dealing with these transformations that are happening in science and that are being monetized through business ventures. With very, very little accountability to a broader public body, which historically we've called government. So the more government weakens, the more it declines, the more it has no capacity to understand the conversation we've had today or to interject the values that society agrees upon, the less this is going to be a force for the good, frankly. So I agree with what you're saying, and and I didn't really want to, say that you're wrong. You're not wrong. You're obviously right about the need to think about purpose and meaning in the context of all of this, and we can do it personally or we can do it as a society, and those could produce very different outcomes for us. So I'm going to let Jeannette have the last word on this set of questions.
When Adrian was talking, I was thinking, you said, what is the meaning? I was thinking even deeper, more philosophically, what is the purpose of humankind? What is our role in the universe? Because if you talk about human obsolescence, and by the way, Judith is absolutely right. The progress, if you will, we've made in effective computing is tremendous, and these kinds of emotional bots are already here. If you think about chat bots that have been proliferating around, and we're going to see more of them. First of all, I want to say that as a technologist and a computer scientist, data scientist, I always am optimistic about using technology for good and making sure that we take responsibility for what it is we invent, and ensure that try to ensure that the uses of the technology are for good. And I think we have tremendous capability with AI and data science and so on for healthcare, energy, climate, all these societal grand challenges, social justice. There's potential for us with this technology to actually do better. We just have to make the right decisions, if you will. And I think what's happening right now is that because this technology is in our face as just lay people, and because there's a lot of media attention to this technology and the goods and the bads, now is the time to have this conversation. And also at the same time, we have the rise of China, our own political situation right now, and finally, I do believe IT companies waking up and saying, we actually should take a step back and think about perhaps regulating face recognition technology is a good idea. Well, what would that look like? So I think it's a great thing that the conversation is now in the public. The people who have to, be in the room up for this conversation, it's happening. And I don't know what the answer is going to look like, but it's not going to be solved with technology alone or policy alone, government alone, industry alone, or academia alone. It's got to be the mix of the conversation. And I'm just being an optimist. I just think that society, individually and societally, will make progress. I don't think there's an answer, a solution, but I think we all want to survive, and so for the purpose of survival, we'll figure out something that will make progress in this complicated situation. And I think, Esther, you asked a really good question, which is how do we bring our value system into the technology and use of the technology? And I think that the challenge there is that many cultures and societies have different value systems, but technology itself, is kind of, everyone has this kind of smartphone that has this capability. So do we have smartphones that project different value systems? Is that where we're going? I don't know.
Thank you. What I would like to do quickly is take a couple of questions from the audience, because this is too exciting and interesting to not let you participate. And then I'm just going to ask our panel to respond to what parts of the questions they are interested in responding to. So we can do a set of bullet questions. I see 1, 2, 3. Just wait for the mic 1 sec.
Hello. Enjoyed what all of you
And please
had to say.
identify yourself. Sorry.
My name is Jack.
That was big help.
I was recently at a China Institute event with Kai-Fu Lee and a man by the name of McAfee. Kai-Fu Lee was the former CEO of Google China and leads one of the main investment firms in both China and the United States in regards to AI, investment in AI. And he recently came out with a book about AI. And I asked a question about some of the pitfalls of AI and, along the lines of what Elon Musk sometimes talks about. And in many ways, I'm quite fearful of AI, but also there's another professor of AI and biology at MIT who I think is an example of how AI could really benefit the intellectual and scientific health communities and humanity. Her name is Stephanie Seneff, and she started off in biology and later became very interested in computer science and AI. And what she does is she figures out ways to have AI aggregate research and look at thousands of individual research projects.
Okay, we need the question.
And basically she takes them and puts them all together and has figured out quite a lot about how the human body works, the effects of Roundup, things like autism. And I think more research should be aggregated by AI. And AI, what you said about the individual human being very important, I think AI, one of the main things that AI can really do is kind of take the individual importance and congregate it and make it even far more useful.
Okay, thank you. The next question. Question has a question mark at the end of question.
Quick question regarding how to not feel judged by our robot servants. For example, there's a person driving in a car. The car says, "Hey, sir, it looks like you're getting really angry." How, if me telling a person that who's driving, the person engages in an anger response. I work as a mediator. Usually when people are angry, they don't admit that they're angry. Calm down is the worst thing you can say to someone, and they're going to blame me that I'm too sensitive. Knowing that my robot car is not sensitive, how are we as a species able to deal with being told that we're angry without having this backlash? Or do you think this is going to be a revolution in coming to terms with our own emotions?
Well, this is
Okay,
actually...
wait. I want one more question, and then we're all going to just take a shot, everybody here, at whatever parts of the questions. There was one more question right there next to you.
Hi, Justin Lewis, CEO of Casebook PBC. We actually use AI for improvements in human services. So I'm in the pro-AI camp. Let's be clear on my bias. But one of the questions that I have is based on something that Chris brought up, which is that based on the same experiments, they saw different behaviors based on the political leanings of individuals, i.e. Republicans moving more, confirming their bias more than the other side. How is that then being used by politicians to drive policy making, i.e. is there a context component to this that is actually driving the use of AI to either manipulate particular populations or to actually improve policy?
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is just ask our panelists, starting with Jeannette and ending with Judith, just take a shot at any aspect of these three questions or anything else they want to add.
I think
Okay, well, I'll take the question. I'll take the question about how do we prevent the angry driver from getting even angrier once the intervention has been made. And in the interest of time, I summarized kind of crudely. I got a lot of this from a company called Affectiva, which actually is a spin-off from the Effective Computing Lab at MIT, and they're working with automobile industries. And they're very concerned about the exact question that you asked. So they're experimenting with, for example, rather than if the car detects emotional distress, maybe some calming music will come on. It's not, I made it blunter than it sounds. There's a lot of work being done on making sure that tonally the car is not projecting judgment. So creating these, you've seen this, if you saw Ex Machina, you've seen this, and every science fiction movie that involves a subservient robot, you've seen this. They're highly skilled at sort of managing the emotions of their human interlocutor. And a fascinating finding is that, so there's a lot of work being done now with using artificially intelligent interviewers to do triage in psychiatric situations, right? And one of the findings is that people will actually tell an avatar more that's being used to just go through this set of questions, this list of questions that every sort of triage nurse goes through. They will yield more information about their emotional state to an avatar than to a human because they feel less judged. Now that's just about programming, because you could certainly imagine programming an extremely judgmental computer, and I know a guy at Carnegie Mellon who does that, interrupting and annoying computers who piss people off. I mean, you could do whatever. But I would say commercially, the interest is in creating non-threatening computers. And then at the next level up, when we're talking about semi-autonomous and autonomous cars and the handoff, right, the computer can just shut the car down, right? And that may piss the driver off, but there's nothing they can do about it. But there's definitely this question of managing the emotional response of the human that's being, let's say, manipulated by the robot or the computer. This is a very big topic.
Chris?
Yeah, just very briefly to the question about whether there's kind of asymmetric polarization, whether one party is driving things more than the other. In terms of AI, I don't know of any evidence that it's leaning on one side. Of course, we all know Cambridge Analytica and that story, but I think there's a lot of other evidence that the left is using similar type of interventions. If we look at voting, though, we do see strong evidence of asymmetric polarization. Over the last 30 years, conservatives taking increasingly conservative positions, whereas Democrats are only moving slightly to the left. So it's hard to say exactly.
Adrian?
All right, so that was mostly about AI stuff. But I also have a lot of research on mind perception, which I like to call mind attribution. So I think it was Descartes, like the only mind that I actually know exists is mine. And so when I'm looking at all of you and assuming you have minds, I'm creating that out of something. It turns out people really are aggressive when it comes to mind attribution. We see minds in everything. We see faces in the clouds, right? And I think my dog has a mind that is very, clever, and probably that's just me putting it on there. And so thinking in the same ways about sort of how technology is influencing our cognitive abilities, we can also think about this with social relationships, how we relate to others, and how a lot of people are hungry for social connection. So I kind of want to throw it back to this point, which was meant to be provocative about what we value. So there are social values, but there are also internal needs that we might value. And for example, in Japan, there's a large aging population that has nobody to spend time with them. And they're a lot more accepting of robots in Japan, and you have caretaker robots that are being developed, which provides some sort of a social relationship for somebody that would have nothing otherwise. And so I think that's interesting, seeing that maybe at this individual level, this is providing something of value. There's a very real human value. But then if you scale that out and say, do we want our relationships to be with robots because they're easier than relationships with people, then maybe we get afraid of it, right? And so thinking about how these values will scale out at the individual level, at the societal level, and then beyond human society, environmental issues, right, and where we fit into this larger sphere. That's it.
Thank you. Jeannette.
Let me take your question about anger and relating with robots and so on, and your response one level further, because one thing that I thought Adrian would speak about is how over time, when there is this new device or new technology, we actually learn how to interact with it. And so it could very well be that once we learn that the car is going to tell us or try to calm us down in some way, whether it's music or talking to us, we will know, oh, it's just a car saying that, I mean, we won't say it that way. We'll say it in a very angry manner because we're probably in an angry state. But that it's just like, my guess is that we learn how to interact with individuals on an individual basis. That's, I guess, emotional intelligence. And we will probably similarly learn how to interact with our self-driving cars or our semi-self-driving cars, as we will with our robots in our homes. And then you were talking about values, like in Japan, people are more accepting of robots, and there are more robots helping care for the elderly and the chronically ill. That's a cultural difference. And so we wouldn't want to take that away from the Japanese, who are perhaps more accepting than we are right now in America. So we have to be sensitive to those different value systems. And in terms of, I thought your question about the political extremes was, is AI going to be used by politicians to more effectively reinforce their own platforms and influence voters? And the answer is very likely. I mean, I'm actually surprised you didn't say that's happening already.
Well, I just want to thank this extraordinary panel for this discussion, kicking us off this morning at a very high level. I am optimistic about the future on the basis of, I actually have a reason. I have an empirical reason for being optimistic, which is the interest in this day today in the discussion about these issues, and the extraordinary intelligence of this panel in taking on very complex issues that we all worry and are concerned about. The fact that that is happening is something to be optimistic about. So thank you all very much. We're going to convene for 5 minutes and then come right back into the room, I know. And I know we're running a little late, but we started a little late.
Okay, so real quick, first of all, good morning. I hope everybody's suitably depressed, except for Esther. as the next panel makes its way up here, we're going to have a special multimedia presentation.